Hey, thanks for joining us again today at Mount Pisgah Church. Well, we're glad that you're with us. This morning I'm going to be sharing a message entitled The Coming Storm and Walking on the Water. There is a storm brewing, and it is one that is going to be surprising and shocking for so many people here in our country and in the world, for so many people in the church. But here's the issue. In the midst of this storm, God is going to invite us to get out and learn how to walk on the water with Him. And I wonder, are you ready to learn how to walk on water in the midst of some of the fiercest storms that life will bring? Again, if you're ever in the Mount Pisgah area, we invite you to join us Sunday morning, 10 a.m., 1288 Mount Pisgah Church Road, Apex, North Carolina. And again, if you have any prayer needs, please feel free to put them down in the comments section below. May God's grace and peace be yours in fullest measure, and thanks for joining us. All righty, let's jump into the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew chapter 14. You have your Bible, you can open there. If not, it will be up on the screen. Matthew 14 is a familiar passage to us. It's recorded in 3 of the Gospels, and it is the instance where Jesus comes to the disciples in the middle of a storm, walking on top of the water. And it's just, Matthew has he gives a real account here of a little bit more extended than what the other Gospel writers do. But it says right away, Yeshua made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. And of course, this is just following him having fed the really close, probably more to 20,000 people, because only the men were counted, and that was over 5,000. So we're talking a lot of people he provided supernaturally for them. They were, according to John, ready to come and seize him and make him their king. And but he had other plans. And so he immediately goes and sends the crowds away. And it says, after he sent the crowds away, he went up on the hillside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long way from land, tossed around by the waves, for the wind was against it. Now in the 4th watch of the night, Yeshua came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out with fear. But immediately Yeshua spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, I am. Don't be afraid." Answering, Peter said to him, "Master, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water to go to Yeshua. But seeing the wind, he became terrified, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Master, save me." And immediately Yeshua reached out his hand and grabbed him. And he said to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "You really are Ben Elohim," or the Son of God. That's who you really, really are. And one of the other gospel writers records the fact that immediately when he got into the boat, they were instantaneously at the place where they were supposed to go on the other side of the lake, whereas this incident's taking place out in the middle of the lake. So it was a supernatural kind of like beam me up thing. Instantaneously they were there. And it's only interesting that that was just mentioned in passing by the gospel writers. But it was a supernatural event that they experienced, really whisking through time instantaneously and being where they needed to be. You know, this always, when you read this story, you think about, a storm on the sea. And as we've talked about over the last few months, especially in all the conditions in the world, this is a theme. If you type it into Google about a coming storm, you pull up thousands and thousands of links. Storms are coming for the economies. Storms are coming for social cultures. Storms are coming politically in cultures. Storms of conflict between nations. Because people associate a storm and something that is tumultuous like that with tumultuous events that are taking place in the world. And that's true. There is a storm that's coming, and there could be a storm that's coming for us as a country. Obviously, there's a lot happening in the world today. But you know what? Storms come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, think about a hurricane. That's a big, big storm, and it impacts an awful lot of people. Or some are localized thunderstorm that only pops up over just a small few square miles. Both of them are still storms. Both of them can do damage. Both of them can cause fear and terror. Sometimes those little localized storms are a whole lot more frightening, especially with lightning popping all around, than some big hurricane that you can basically see coming. But they're different. And all of us in our lives will have storms we go through. Sometimes it's something we experience collectively, maybe as a nation or as the body of Christ. Other times, there's storms that we experience individually, things that we walk into in life or that come our way in life that are unexpected. And it's tumultuous for us. It's decisions that have to be made, or people that have to be confronted, or relationships that are broken that need to be mended, and or health reports, and family issues, all kinds of storms that come to us. And one of the most important things that I think we forget, because the other gospel writers don't talk a whole lot about this whole incident of Peter walking on the water, is that in the midst of the storm, when these storms are happening, what the world needs to see, yes, it's Jesus, but the world needs to see those who follow him walking on water. They need to see us walking on the water of the storm in our life. And we can. We're invited into that when we look at this simple little story that happened with these guys. Jesus had certain conditions that everything was set for them to enter into this experience that he was getting ready to place them in. In fact, the scripture tells us that Jesus himself is the very one who sent them into this intentionally. When you look at verse 22 of Matthew chapter 14, notice what it says. Right away, Yeshua, what's that word? Made. And that's intentional. Because in the Greek language, it's literally, he's taking them by the arm forcibly and putting them on the boat. They didn't want to leave him. Remember all this kerfuffle that just happened of people wanting to make him a king. They were concerned about leaving him behind, and he had to reassure them everything was all right, but he forced them into this boat in order to send them to where he was going to lead them. So in one sense of the word, Jesus led them into this storm because he placed them in it, which is not an unfamiliar theme. God led Moses and the children of Israel to the edge of the Red Sea with no way of escape and only one way through. He led them there. He led David to go face Goliath, led him into that. He led, as we talked about a few weeks ago, Jehoshaphat and the people of Judah to go out and face their enemies. All of those were tumultuous things for the people who were experiencing frightening things. But God was the one that led them there. Sometimes we need to remember that when these storms pop up, they're not just things that are attacks from Satan. Sometimes they are storms that God has led us right into for a purpose. And so he led them into the midst of this storm. But here's the thing. Here they were. Sea of Galilee's not a huge lake, but it's pretty good size. And they're probably, a good ways off of shore now in a very, very susceptible, a position where they're susceptible to a lot of danger. They were too far to turn around and go back. And then, of course, this storm breaks out. And these storms on the Sea of Galilee, even today, can be very, very, very dangerous. Just recently, I read of them having to send a rescue team out on the Sea of Galilee to get a fisherman in his boat out there who was in one of these kinds of storms and was literally, his boat was about to sink and he was about to drown. And so it's a very dangerous place because it's located several hundred feet under sea level. And when the winds and all come over those mountains, they come over the mountains and then swoop down into the lake, and they can cause a lot of havoc. But I'm sure that it crossed their mind when they were out there on that boat in that storm, this one question: where is he? If he was on here, we'd be okay. We don't have anything to worry about. Does he even know what we're going through? And the fact of the matter was, according to Mark, he did. He saw them in the storm. Look what Mark says in Mark 6, 47 and 48. When evening came, it says, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. And then what does it say? He saw? Is that what it says? He saw them. He saw them. And he saw them struggling to row because the wind was against them. He knew exactly where they were, even though they didn't know that. Why did he know that? Because he sent them into it. He wasn't taking his watchful eye off of them. He knew exactly where they were at and what they were experiencing. Just like when you and I face our storms, he's got his eyes on us. Sometimes it may sense that his presence is withdrawn. He might seem to be a million miles away. But he has got his eye fixed on me and you in these storms. And as they sat on this boat, you see, they were facing a horrible headwind, which means they're struggling with all their might and not budging. Felt like they were stuck, and they just couldn't do it. And with everything they tried, and here these guys were seasoned fishermen. They were familiar with this lake. They were familiar with these kinds of storms. But this was something unique and different. Wasn't anything they'd really been familiar with before. And so they could not make any headway. And the waves are crashing against the boat. And this is not a huge ship. This is a smaller boat. So the water's coming over the sides. You know all of the things they knew of what could happen. And the sea being as rough as it was, might be very likely that if they were to be thrown out, they would all drown. No progress was being made. Tossed about on the tops of these waves. Sometimes it can feel like that for us, can't it? It seems like we are struggling against the storm that we're in the middle of, and we can't seem to make headway. We can't seem to progress forward. And we're again wondering, where's God? They were crying out to God on the boat. I'm sure they were crying out to God. But again, this little insight that we get that they were not aware of, but we get a picture of it now because the gospel writer records it, is that Jesus was standing there watching them. But again, he's never going to intervene in the midst of a storm that we're going through until the exact right moment. Has to be just at the right time. He never does anything late, so he's never late, but he's never early either. God is not in a hurry. He operates on his own schedule in his own time for the purposes of which he has for you and me and the storms that we may go through and the things that we might face. And the thing we have to remember is he knows what he's doing. Even if the storm around you and I seems really, really bad. But there's purpose in this. He has a purpose for them being where they are. And really, when you stop and think about a purpose, well, there's the one obvious one is that he is about to give to them a new understanding and revelation of his identity. He's just done it in the producing of the loaves and the fish and the multiplying of all of that. But now he's going to give them, it's kind of like cream on the cake. It's the icing on top of the cake. It's the cherry on top of the cake. I'm going to give you a little something more that nobody else is going to see. All those tens of thousands of people aren't going to see this. It's just you guys. You're going to see something because you need to see this. Because he knew what was facing all of them down the road. He knew the challenges and the storms they were all going to face, and they would need to remember this moment. They would need to remember this experience. Peter especially. Peter especially was going to need to remember this. And so he has them there so that he can reveal to himself to them in a fresh way. And he's about to show them that he is Lord over creation. And he is Lord over nature. And you see, for the people of that day, waters and oceans were scary things because they believed they held dark forces, anti-forces against them. And that's why when storms came up and the pagans, they would always associate it with the wrath of some god. And there were dark forces waiting to sweep them up. And people of antiquity, that's the kind of mindset they had. And these guys were affected by that. The sea was a scary place. You didn't want to be thrown out of your boat. Remember Jonah? I mean, they were frightened, but Jesus was about to show them that he was Lord over all of that. Even under the dark depths and anything that was beneath, he was on top of it. They were going to have to see that as he revealed it to them. And what experience they had, especially for Peter, did demonstrate, and we'll see that in a minute, the power of trust. Especially trust in Jesus and what Jesus has said. Because you see, there's never a need for us to have faith and trust unless we're put into situations that require it. It's not going to grow. It's not going to take deeper root in us unless we're placed in a position where we have to trust him. And he's put us there. He knows where we are. He's got his eye on us. But even though it seems like we're not making headway, he has not forgotten about us at all. And so Jesus comes to give this revelation to them. And in verses 25 through 27, it says, now in the fourth watch of the night, which is between the hours of 3 and 6. So we're probably talking somewhere 4-ish, 4:30-ish in the morning. They've been out there for hours struggling in this storm. But it says, in this fourth watch of the night, Yeshua came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. It's a ghost! And they cried out with fear. But immediately Yeshua spoke to them, saying, take courage. I am. Don't, or literally, stop being afraid. Stop it. And see, the thing about Jesus coming, and when you just look at the natural progression of the story, he came at the darkest time. The darkest time of the night. This was the darkest time of the night. And yet, not only was it the darkest time of the night under normal conditions, now they're in a storm. So there's no stars, no moon shining. It's cloudy, rain probably. The wind is whipping up like a hurricane for them. Lightning flashing. But he came at the darkest time. But here's the thing. Before they knew it, he was right there in the midst of that storm with him and with them. But would they see that? He was close by before they saw him. He was right there with them in the midst of it, walking on the water. And then whatever happened had to probably be a flash of lightning that gave them a glimpse of him walking on top of the water, which, again, nothing they'd ever experienced or seen or even read of before, other than passages in the Psalms that talk about Adonai riding in the midst of the sea and on the seas and on the waters. He's right there in the midst of the storm with them, and they hadn't seen it yet. And then when that flash takes place and they see him walking in the water, they realized he's here, but he's come to us in a way we didn't expect. It's a unique way. In a way that they weren't preparing for, a way that they weren't planning for. Here's the thing. He's not predictable. If you sit back and think you've got God figured out, you don't know God. When he comes to us in storms, he is always going to come generally in ways we do not expect and are not even looking for. They were not expecting that. And it scared them to death by the way he came to them. I mean, it freaked them out. Screaming like little banshees all over that boat. Grown, strong, burly fishermen, zealots. I mean, terrified. Because usually if you saw a ghost, that meant you were about to die. Not a good omen. And here they were in a position to die. But he came to them. And here's the thing. The only way we'll see Jesus in the midst of the storms we go through, whether they're big ones or little ones or whatever, is that we are expectantly looking for him in the storm. You have to be looking. If your focus is on the boat, if your focus is in preserving your life on the boat, or trying to escape the storm and figuring out how you're going to get out of this, and your focus is on the boat, and he's standing right out there beside the boat, you won't see him. Because your focus is all about trying to fix it. Your focus is about how to escape it. Your focus is about how to change everything and get it all done, rather than expectantly looking for him in the midst of the storm. That's the only way they were going to see him in the midst of that dark time. And that's why when they got that glimpse of him, immediately he speaks to them. In the storm, he speaks to them. And the first thing he tells them to do, he requires them to be courageous. Take courage. Be encouraged. Take heart. That's, coming from the lips of someone who's on top of the storm that's about to take you under. Be encouraged. And then he reveals to them and reminds them, I am. Some of the translations say it is I, but that's not how it's written. The original says, I am. And they knew exactly the connection when he made that. I am the God of the burning bush. The God of Moses on Mount Sinai. I am. I am Lord of all of this. I am who made this. I am who spoke these things into existence. I am. I am the Lord over this storm, and I am with you. I am here for you and with you. And he rebukes their fear, literally telling them, stop being afraid. You don't need to be afraid. And you know what? Here's the thing. When you and I are going through storms, if we're expectantly trying to find him, we may not see him, but if we do this, and here's the thing, this is a storm. If you've ever been outside in a hurricane in the middle of the wild wind when it's blowing and the rain is pelting you side to side and the clouds are, lightning is flashing and all of that, it's hard to hear. And the only way they could get their ears tuned in to hear him was get their eyes and their focus off of that storm and onto him. They had to be looking at him, zeroed in, not on everything else that was going on around them. And when those storms come, it's just exactly like he did with them. He's going to tell the same thing to you and to me. He's going to say, be encouraged. Take courage. You don't need to be afraid. Stop being afraid. This storm is nothing. Look at me. I'm on top of it. I've got everything under control. Trust me. Trust me. Don't look at that. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. I am. I will see you through whatever you're facing, and I will get you to where you need to be going. Because remember, the gospel accounts, it said, when he put them out, he sent them out onto the sea to get to the other side. So they were going to get to the other side, just like he sent them out to do. Stop being afraid. I am. Well, they had to focus on him, to listen to him. And only one guy was really zeroed in focused, and that was Peter. And here's the invitation in the midst of this storm. Listen. Answering, Peter said to him, Master, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. Notice this word. There's an invitation in it, but Peter used a specific word. Command me to do it. Give me an order. Don't give me a choice. Don't say, well, if you feel like it, come on out here. He said, command me. And when Jesus heard those words, he said, come. Again, not just a little sweet invite. It's an order. Get out of the boat and get on top of this water and walk on it. Sometimes when we're facing storms, Jesus has a very strong word of command for us. Get out of the boat. Start walking on this water. The boat's the last place you need to be. You need to be out here with me, not in the boat, not in all the not in everything that's rocking your world. You need to come out here with me because this is where I want you. This is where I'm inviting you. But Peter gets out, and it says, and he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became terrified, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Master, save me. And immediately Yeshua reached out his hand and grabbed him and said to him, Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got in the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, You really are the Son of God. See, a lot of people think the safest place to be is in the midst of a storm, whether it's our own personal little storm, whether it's a global storm, a national storm. A lot of people think the safest place to be is in the boat. They believe that's the safest place to be secure. See, that was a place that was familiar and safe feeling to them. It was a predictable place. They understood how the mechanics of the boat worked and what it was supposed to do and everything that was going on in there. They felt that was the safest place. They were looking for some kind of physical protection to provide them safety and stability. And it wasn't going to do that. And I don't care what storm we face. Financial, health, global crises, whatever. There is no physical thing that is going to provide the safety, security, and stability that you and I need. Not in these storms. They won't do it. Peter knew that the safest place to be was out of the boat and on the water with him. He knew that. And he just inherently knew it. In here, I'm drowning. Out here, I'm safe. I'm safe with him. Wherever he is, I'll be safe. See, Peter was getting a glimpse of Jesus being the Ark of Noah on top of the flood. It was the place that was safe in the midst of the storm. The Red Sea. Peter knew that the one he'd already said, I am. Peter knew that's the one that split the waters and walked our people through on dry ground. Yeah, the safest place for me is out there with him, not in his boat. Can I come to you on the water? Order me to. Yes, because that's where I really want you, not in the boat. See, this is an order. So it's a command. And guess what? If God commands you and I to do something in a storm, he's going to back it up, give us everything we need to do what he has asked us to do. So what did Peter need? He needed the ability to walk on water, didn't he? And he got it. He had it. No human had ever done that before other than Jesus. He had the ability and the power to walk on the water because Jesus had ordered him, and Jesus is going to provide everything we need whenever he asks us to do something in our storm. He will give us exactly what we need to walk on the water. How do you do that? How do you walk on water? One has to do with focus. Where's your eyes? When Peter got out of that boat, his eyes were on Jesus, and he was standing upon his command. What was holding Peter up? It was the supernatural power of God, but the reality was it was the word that Jesus gave to him. Come. He was standing on that word, that promise, that call to obey, and I promise you I will give you the strength to stand and everything you need. Come on, come. Ask in your storm, God, what do you want from me in this storm? What are you asking me to do? What are you asking me to do? And listen. Again, Peter had to have his ears tuned in. His eyes were focused on Jesus, and he had to hear that voice come through the wind and the rain. Come. Come. And he got out, and he acted. That invitation or that order to come would have meant nothing had you had 1 foot over the side of the boat on the water. No, it required a total commitment of his body, didn't it? Total commitment of trust in the storm. See, when God calls you to act and me to act in our storms, and again, if it's a collective storm and it's something that's shaking our nation, He's going to collectively speak to the body of Christ. He's going to order us to do some things because He says the world needs to see people walking on water in this. They need to see people out here who are trusting me and what I'm doing for them. Or a personal storm that you're going through that only maybe a small group of people are even aware of and that are watching you. They're observing your reactions. They're observing your responses. They're observing how you're navigating this hard place in your life. They're watching. Some of them are unbelievers. Some of them are very weak believers who need some encouragement. But they're watching and they're seeing if you're going to stay in the boat or if you're going to really get out and walk on the water and trust God. What that looks like is going to be different for everybody. For one person, Jesus may say, I want you to trust me and give this away. For another person, Jesus said, I want you to trust me, leave here and go there. I want you to trust me and go fix this with this person that the relationship is broken and this needs to be fixed right now. This storm has come in to get your attention away from yourself and get it on this person. You need to fix this relationship. It could be a number of things. It could be trust me to provide manna for heaven if you need it. Because you don't have anything to eat. Trust me. It's going to look different. But here's the thing. You and I need to keep our eyes trustingly on Him. Because that was what Peter's failure was. Got his eyes off of Jesus and he got his eyes back on the storm. And immediately he began to sink. Because now he wasn't obeying the command. He was reneging. And then he wasn't trusting the word come anymore. And he began to sink. Of course, Jesus sees him. We don't know whether he went underwater and Jesus sees him. We don't know if he was just going down and Jesus reached out quickly and grabbed him. But they both had to get back to the boat, right? And I would assume Peter got back to the boat the way he got out there to Jesus. He walked on the water, holding on to his hand, being held up by him. Sometimes we'll feel ourselves to start sinking, don't we? We feel like we're going under. We feel like our faith is weak. We've cried our eyes out. We've begged, we've pleaded to God, and it seems like just everything is silent. And we feel ourselves sinking, and then all of a sudden we cry out, and there's that hand. I'm not going to let you sink. Get up. And He enables us to walk with Him on the water. So however long this experience lasted for Peter, it made an indelible print in his mind, and it was this one thing. No matter what I go through, it goes back to the old saying, trust and obey. Keep my eyes on Him, nowhere else. Don't look at what's going on around me. Look at the Master. He was triumphant. Really. It was a lesson learned. He walks back, holding on to Jesus. And the end result of him walking on the water and Jesus walking on this water is that God's faithfulness is manifested. God's presence is manifested in this storm. They experienced miraculous things. There was miraculous provision for them. And that's what begins to happen as people watch you and I walk on the water in our storms. They start seeing how even when we feel weak, we go to the Lord and He gives us strength. And they see us hanging in there. They see us turning to Him when we feel like we just can't take another step. They see that and they see His provision. They see the peace. Sometimes when everybody else around you is shaken up, you have peace. You have confidence and calm. It's observable. They see sometimes the miraculous provision that God makes for you in a supernatural way and you share that with people. They observe our character and our conduct in these storms, and they are watching. And the biggest thing that they need to see, obviously, is to see Jesus and to see His power working in me and in you in the midst of our storm, and us learning how to walk on the water with Him. And again, it goes back to simply trusting and obeying Him. Trusting and obeying Him. I don't know what storms you're facing. All of us, within the next year, according to people on the news, in the next week, could face storms that we never would have imagined. People are facing storms today in Central Africa. Christians are running for their lives. They never a year ago expected this kind of persecution to be on them, and now it is, and they're running from place to place, hiding in the jungles and places to escape Islamic death squads. Israelis are running back and forth to bomb shelters constantly, all day long, every single day for the last little over a year. Economies are being shaken up. Diseases are running rampant. I mean, you just look, and then we look at our own society and the cultural chaos that's just a fuse, just ready for somebody to light the last little bit of it and set it off. And believe me, when those kind of storms come, the boat gets mighty shaky. And there's no one place to be, and that's not in the boat. That's on the water with him. But we've got to be focused and listening and asking for his guidance and depending upon him. Peter was so dependent upon Jesus when he got out of that boat. You realize what he was saying? He was telling him, I trust you. I'm showing you I trust you by doing what I'm doing. That's faith. Faith isn't just saying something or feeling something. It's action. Demonstrable actions that show faith. And he got out of that boat and said, I'm showing you I trust you. I believe you. And I'm obeying you. I'm obeying you. The only promise, only secure thing he had was one word from Jesus to hold him up. Come. I hope that God gives you and gives me the grace in the storms that we face in our lives to show people how to walk on water. Amen. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for your truth. Thank you for the principles that you show us in this small story. Father, I pray for each of us in here. Maybe we're in the middle of a storm right now. We're coming out the other side of a storm. We may be getting ready to go into one. We don't know. But you do. And help us to remember that sometimes we are led into those things for the one purpose of learning how to walk on water. Give us all the grace we will need to keep our attention and our focus on you and on your word. And let us be willing to step out and obey you as you speak to us, whatever that word may be. Let the world see your children in the midst of the storms going on all around, walking on water. In your name.